Welcome back. I know it's been a while. Got really busy. My parents came to town. I got sick and I got busy again. So, a bunch of things compounded to me not making a video for like 2+ weeks. Anyway, back again with a serious topic. I even have a script and everything. I'm going to try not to look at it too much. About a serious subject. This keeps coming up in my playing life, in my teaching life. This subject just keeps cropping up, and it's a pretty simple one. Why do bass trombonists want to play too loud all the time? And I think there's a few obvious answers to that, and I think we should probably do less of it. So let's talk about it. That was a little piece I played for you. Let's put this away. Don't need it now. So why do bass trombonists play too loud a lot of the time? Well, this is all my opinion, of course, but my first thought is that it's just really addicting to play loud. I think generally on a lot of instruments, it's kind of fun to play loud. You get to like do something that you can't do with your normal body. Most of us can't sing or yell as loud as we can play, and that's why people like to play drums really loud and all sorts of stuff. I think that's just a general thing. Another reason we like to do it on bass trombone is that almost no people can sing as low as bass trombone as loudly, especially that kind of sound, just like a room-filling sound, right? A lot of other instruments can play kind of shrill or high ranges, even like tenor trombone and stuff, so that's close to bass trombone. But the loud ranges are a little bit higher than we might want to hear, and the bass ranges sound really good to us. They feel really good. So again, another way that makes it addicting. And then I think there's several physical reasons why bass trombone is capable of that, and some reasons why people lean into it even more than they would if it were a different design. So let's talk about that real quick. Number one, bore size and bell size. Bass trombones are just 9 feet long, same length as a giant list of other instruments like euphoniums, marching baritones, tenor trombones. There's a huge list of 9-foot instruments. That's, of course, the length with the slide all the way in, no valves. But this is basically the largest bore to everything else ratio that we have of any of those instruments. Yeah, there's some like large bore euphoniums and stuff. They have a lot of bends. They have a lot of extra tubing. They have piston valves you have to play through. None of them are going to play as easily loudly. So bass trombone's got a huge leg up on that. Flow rate. Flow rate is just how much air you can put through an instrument and it continues to work. And some of you may have already heard this statistic, but bass trombone and flute, and I'll have a flute of course, have the highest flow rate of any instrument that is played today, any wind instrument that is played today. And that's just how much air you can put through the instrument still makes like a good sound, right? Flute, you can put a lot of air through that because you're wasting a bunch of it over the flute, right? And bass trombone is the other one. You might think there's way, way larger tubas. There's tubas that are twice as long as this, that are 6/4 size, there's huge tubas. Yes, but they actually have less flow rate than a bass trombone because they have so much more inbuilt resistance to that air. If you just go like this through a bass trombone, you can exhaust all of your air very quickly with basically no resistance. It just kind of falls out, just like if the instrument wasn't there. If you do the same thing on tuba, it's going to have some resistance and you're not going to be able to exhale as easily as you can on bass trombone. So, already another mark, I guess we have two now, against bass trombone, I guess we can say against, in the loudness category. And the reason flow rate matters is that you can play a note and just fill it with as much air as you possibly can, and the instrument will still work. There's a lot of other 9-foot instruments where that's not the case, including things like tenor trombone, which are the same length, very similar design, and the bores are just a little bit smaller, bells a little bit smaller, and you can't really do the same thing on a tenor trombone. A lot of that is also due to the mouthpiece, of course, being really large in comparison to the instrument, the largest of kind of the matches that we have in the brass world. The bell size and how far away it is also make a big difference on bass trombone. The bell is a little bit farther away than most tenor trombones, not all, but also it's larger. And that means that it technically, the larger a bell, the more projection it has. So when people say that the Bach L bells, 10.5-inch bells, project less, they actually physically, like the physical math says that they project more than a smaller bell would. And you can tell this by looking at sack butts. Sack butts are pretty much just trombones. They're just trombones with a different bell flare. Obviously some other small differences as well, but the bell flares are very small. They kind of end up just a little bit bigger than they started, right? And the real sound difference between sack butt and trombone, it's actually not very large. Sack butt sounds like trombone, but they cannot play loud. There's a huge cap on their dynamic level and how far that sound goes. And that's because the bell is so small. So when you make that flare ever larger like this and very dramatic, starting small and getting very large, then it projects more and more and more. So it projects more, and we get less feedback because the bell is farther away and it's projecting the sound that way rather than radiating it back to the player. You end up having to play louder to hear yourself at the same level as if you're playing tenor trombone or maybe euphonium or something else that you're familiar with. And that ends up with people playing way louder because they're just like, can't really hear myself. And that sound is just like destroying everything in front of them and they have no idea. This is exacerbated with sterling silver bells, but still a problem on these. I had the exact same problem on my first Bach 50 that I owned. The Holton I played before had a closer bell, and I was really used to my feedback, and I played this Bach with a 9.5, the bell a little bit farther away, and I was playing like twice as loud to hear myself at the same level. And everyone in front of me was like, what are you doing? Why are you playing so loud? Guess what? The instrument made me do it. Also, and I think this is a really gigantic part of this problem, is that a lot of players with kind of an inefficient or not a real chop setup, a real embouchure, are going to sound much better when they play louder as compared to softer, because the instrument gets very diffuse and the sound kind of goes nowhere if you don't have an efficient setup on bass trombone. Especially compared to something like tenor trombone, kind of makes your life a little bit easier, or euphonium, where you can play it like really, really badly and it still sounds all right. Bass trombone does not reward that. But if you just kind of dump some air through it and play louder, it ends up sounding quote unquote better. And so a lot of younger players will just kind of turn all of their dynamics up by like 5 notches because they just see that as a better sound. And I see that a lot in students. Not calling you out in my studio, but I do hear it as well. And we have this whole culture of machismo. Which one is it? It's Italian. Machismo? It would be a K sound? Anyway, we have this whole culture around bass trombone, I think is due to these things that I just listed above. Bass trombone makes it easy to play loud, and therefore people have leaned into that, and we have this whole like feeling that like, oh, bass trombone's kind of like lead trumpet. We can change octaves whenever we want. We can play over the release. We can play the last note down an octave or down 2 octaves. We can play louder than everybody else in the section or than everybody else in the band. And that's okay. You're playing bass trombone. That's what you're supposed to do. You can even see this kind of codified in the real world. For instance, brass bands in the UK especially, but elsewhere as well, the bass trombone is almost is like a solo instrument that gets to just randomly just turn itself all the way to 100% and just like lay waste to the brass band, because it's one of the few cylindrical instruments, and it's by far the loudest. Of course, the tenor horns and the tenor trombones and stuff are not going to be able to compete with a well-played bass trombone. So even in real music settings, we have just said, oh yeah, bass trombone is just super, super dang loud, and that's all it does. It's either totally hidden within the band, or it is making people's ears bleed. What else do I have to say about that? I have a lot of things to say about it. There's things like the recordings, famous recordings like Shostakovich 7 by Chicago Symphony Orchestra. I think that one's from the 80s. I haven't looked it up in a hot second. It's on YouTube. You can go find it pretty easily. They're playing the finale to the last movement, pretty sure. And you can hear Charlie Vernon just destroy the third or fourth trombone part. I think it's actually the fourth trombone part. And honestly, in that setting, it's pretty much what I'd want to hear. It's very high energy. It's still in tune. It's still what I consider to be a good sound. And it really lends the end of that symphony some serious energy. It sounds great. But people will take that and be like, oh, well, I'm going to do that in my college wind ensemble. When, no, that's not really what you should be doing outside of really just a tiny couple settings where that's appropriate. There's the whole low brass creed, which was written by people in Chicago Symphony, which is kind of making fun of the fact that sometimes they get to destroy the ensemble by playing really loud. And the problem is that people take that seriously. They don't see it as a joke, or they see it as a joke only a little bit, and the rest of it's serious. And then they do that in real life, no matter where they're playing. That's where the problem is. And so why is this a problem? Why can't we just play loud all the time? And trust me, I'm not accepting myself from this. I have been this person for so long. Even sometimes I'll catch myself being like, why am I playing this random background part at like 2 fortes? I don't need to be doing this. I am not the important one here. I am also part of the problem. So why is this part of the problem? Well, number one, and most importantly, music is a collaborative art. Almost never are you playing bass trombone literally by yourself. There are some unaccompanied solos, yes. If you're playing as loud as you can in almost any unaccompanied solo, you're probably wrong. That's probably not written, and I can almost guarantee you that an audience, which we are supposed to be playing for, doesn't want to hear that anyway. That's not the right setting for that. So almost anytime you're playing bass trombone, you're playing with other people, and their parts are important too, and the audience wants to hear them as well. So always be thinking of the people around you, whether you're playing bass trombone and piano in a solo setting, playing a duet, you're in a jazz band section, you're in a wind ensemble or a wind orchestra, trombone quartet, a lot of different settings obviously. Choose your moments and make them rare, because the rarer the moment is, the more effective it is. I have been super guilty of this, where I'm just like, I'll just circle a whole page and be like, this is my moment. I'm going to play all this loud. And then when you do that, it's really fatiguing for an audience. They're just like, okay, well, that's all loud, and the brain turns off. But if you choose small moments to be like, whoa, where did that come? That sounds awesome. That's when it's really effective. I'm not saying that we need to never play loud. I'm just saying that those moments should be rare, and they should be chosen very carefully. That's pretty much all I've got. I've thought about this for a long time. Hopefully this is an effective way for me to present it. If it's not, I'm going to do this again, because I think this is a really important subject, and I'd like to know what y'all think about it. That's all I got. Bye-bye.